It's kind of crazy that with the Boruto time skip, one of the biggest things that might actually be the catalyst to the destruction of Konoha is the fact that Boruto is completely outnumbered due to Kawaki's wish upon the magical Ada to basically have everybody in the Shinobi world hunt down Boruto and believe he is the one that killed the 7th Hokage, which ultimately leads to Boruto and Sasuke needing some comrades at the very least in order to obtain their goal of not only clearing Boruto's name, but restoring order to the Shinobi world, and of course freeing Naruto. How do you do that? Well, you gotta look around. Well, who would be unaffected by Kawaki's wish, with Ada having certain restrictions and regulations on who would be affected by her charm in general? And yeah, that guy's Code. Let's talk about this one. Let's go. It's time to get out. And before we continue, if you would hit that subscribe button and that bell, I'd greatly appreciate it. We talk about Boruto, all sorts of different manga and anime over here, and I think you'd really enjoy. Please hit them buttons, subscribe. Thank you. Now, it's no secret that at the very beginning of Boruto's anime and manga, one of the biggest things that is showcased is the fact that Konoha, at some given point in this time skip, will be decimated, destroyed, the Hokage monuments being whittled down to damn near nothing, and ultimately it looking like the Pain Invasion arc all over again. But you gotta ask, well, how do we get to that particular point, right? Obviously, Kawaki is one of the catalysts to this. The fact that in chapters 79 and 80, he decided to go massively rogue, and I believe even chapter 78 as well, where he sends Naruto and Hinata to another dimension and uses Ada to turn the entire Shinobi world upside down and have everybody believing that Boruto killed Naruto the 7th Hokage, and on top of that, that Kawaki is the actual son of Naruto Uzumaki. He is now known as Kawaki Uzumaki. But again, that's just one of the tip of the iceberg of where everything goes from there. Because initially, of course, a lot of us, including myself, when we first read that first chapter or watched that first episode, we thought to ourselves, wow, this Kawaki guy is a very, very bad dude. Like, if he's the one that's responsible for the destruction of Konoha, well, first of all, how did he do it? Like, yo, was Might Guy's wheelchair just not mobile that day? Was like, yo, what happened here? How did this dude come out of nowhere and be able to surpass all of these Shinobi, from Kakashi to Tsunade to everybody from the previous gen and the new gen, and in general, how did he do it? Well, you gotta think to yourself, maybe he didn't do it alone, or maybe he wasn't completely responsible at all for this one. Because just because he's the catalyst to this whole situation, removing Naruto from the story in general, and having Boruto being hunted down, as well as Sasuke being removed from the village, doesn't necessarily mean that Kawaki is the one that decimates Konoha in the time skip. Because let's not forget that despite the fact that Kawaki has done some horrible things and has right now Boruto's whole life in shambles, ultimately, he's not necessarily the biggest threat to the Shinobi world. In fact, there's something that's a little bit more looming and pressing of a matter, if I do say so myself. The fact that Code, one of the remnants of the Korra group, and of course the Avenger for Ishiki Otsutsuki, as well as a 10-tailed Jubi that is spliced up into a bunch of a Jubi army at this particular point, is also waiting in the wings to tear things up. But then you gotta wonder, well, okay, if that is all waiting in the wings, well, how is all of this going to work? Because let's not forget, one of the biggest things that Code has in terms of an axe to grind is with Kawaki. Like, Boruto has just been a little bit of a thorn on his side, and ultimately, of course, he was involved in the death and destruction of Ishiki Otsutsuki, not to mention the fact that Ada had made that deal with Code that, yo, hands off of Kawaki, but you could go after anybody else. So initially that skewed Code's target, but ultimately, since they were children, one of the big people that Code wanted to really get rid of was Kawaki. That's been his reason for a hot minute now, to kind of enact on some sort of vengeance and destruction, and Kawaki has been one of the people that he really wants to get rid of. So you add that into the fact that I don't believe that Code will be affected by Ada's charm, because just like similar to Sarada and similar to Sumire, for whatever reasons they have, he might also be one of the people that is unaffected by Ada's charm because of him being, well, I guess you would say, what, partially Otsutsuki, considering he has some of Ishiki's DNA in him. I mean, I know he fell for her charm in terms of like, oh, I love Ada so much, but there's a high probability that he might not be affected by the whole switcheroo, considering the fact that as well, his hatred for Kawaki runs massively deep. And even if that isn't the case, ultimately, considering the fact that now Kawaki is basically going to be bunkered, sheltered, and ultimately pampered, so to speak, over there in Konoha, because now he is known as basically the heir to Naruto Uzumaki, potentially even becoming the new Hokage. New video on the way. Ultimately, it's going to be a lot more difficult for Code to enact his vengeance on Kawaki, because it's no longer just Kawaki on his own and one foot out the door from Konoha. now it's a little bit more deep and a little bit more complex for Code's situation. And considering the fact that Boruto is basically on the run alongside Sasuke, there's a high probability and high chance that Code might actually look to Boruto in terms of, oh, we might be able to team up, or at the very least vice versa. Now, I don't believe Boruto per se would be the one to extend an invitation of any sort of cooperation with Code, but considering he has his very wise sensei on his side, there might be some possibility of Code being able to maneuver to saying, hey, I hate you, I don't like you, I want you dead too, but how about we team up in order to get where we're trying to go in terms of you got the entire Shinobi world after you, because you got to imagine that just because it starts off with Konoha, just because it's the hidden leaf initially that wants Boruto's head, that's not going to stop it from extending to all of the other villages looking after and wanting to attack and eliminate Boruto for, again, the death of the beloved 7th Hokage. So it's not only a village that Boruto is facing, he's facing against the entire Shinobi world. So hypothetically speaking, there's a possibility that Code might be able to maneuver at that particular point to say, hey, you want to get rid of Kawaki? I want my vengeance on him. Let's work together, and then whatever happens after the fact, happens after the fact. But if you want to get to Kawaki and you want to get to maneuver through all of these villages, you might be able to utilize me with my claw marks. And that might be one of the pivotal aspects that leads to Code ultimately betraying Boruto and Sasuke, assuming they went that route, and yeah, leading an entire invasion into the Hidden Leaf, which would even be more disastrous. But that's not to say that that's the only way that it would be absolutely necessary and needed for Code to ultimately decimate Konoha, the Hidden Leaf. Like, there's clear indications that if he has multiple clones of the Ten Tails, he can at any given point attack the Hidden Leaf. And considering the fact that one of the strongest people in their arsenal, matter of fact, the two strongest people in their arsenal, you know, two people that had the Sage of Six Paths rocking with them for a little period of time, Naruto and Sasuke, no longer there to defend the village. At any given point, even in the midst of the time skip, he can invade and absolutely destroy Konoha, and there won't be the foes that initially standed forth to protect Konoha there to defend. Which again, ultimately does add that Kawaki would be the catalyst to the destruction of Konoha, but if it's Code and his 10-tailed army, ultimately they're the ones that are going to be doing the most destruction. And if you really think about it, why would, if Kawaki at this particular point in the time skip of where we first start off in the beginning of the series with the first episode, first chapter, if he is beloved, if he is looked at as like, oh, the benevolent son of our 7th Hokage, why would he be the one to destroy the Hidden Leaf? He would have no reason to. I mean, other than the fact that maybe he might get distorted mentally even further than he initially was because, hey, he's went down a very dark path, but I doubt that Kawaki would be the one to level Konoha. If anything, it would be more so the big threat that looms and threatens the entire Shinobi world, Code and a Ten Tails. And going back to the whole concept and idea of Code working with Boruto, that is a very plausible thing. Even if Boruto has a disdain for Code, considering he doesn't have many allies, his two allies are currently locked in the Hidden Leaf, Sarada and Sumide, and his sensei doesn't necessarily wholeheartedly believe in him. He more so believes in his daughter and is following through with this because of his daughter. So Boruto could very well be desperate that even if he has an absolute disdain for this dude, if it's a way in to Konoha via the claw marks, that would be something that Boruto might be tempted to utilize, which again would be a catastrophic mistake that ultimately leads to the ruins of Konoha, because yeah, Ten Tails kind of do that, you know. You seen the 4th grade Shinobi War, what happened to Neji? Yeah. And there's a high possibility that all of this could be in the grand finale of the Boruto series in general. Assuming that that time skip part where Boruto and Kawaki finally clash for their fated battle, there's a high possibility that the reason why it's solely Boruto and Kawaki going at it 1v1 is the fact that maybe the entirety of the Hidden Leaf has either already had to evacuate because of Code and the 10-tailed army, or in general they're currently facing Code and the 10-tailed army, with everybody else including Kakashi, Guy in his wheelchair, and the rest of the Shinobi like Rock Lee and them, they might be preoccupied with, again, a massive army of Ten Tails, as well as, again, Code, to be able to do anything. Assuming that this doesn't all take place post that and Code has already been defeated and annihilated thanks to Boruto and Kawaki working together, a la similar to Naruto and Sasuke working together to vanquish threats like Kaguya, Madara, and Obito, and then, of course, going into their final clash. Like, that very well could be the case as well, but nevertheless, I truly believe that when it comes comes to the destruction of Konoha is not necessarily going to be due to Kawaki and his might, and more so is going to possibly be either via Boruto working with Code simply as utilizing him as an ally and ultimately being betrayed, although I don't know how you get betrayed by a homie that you shouldn't be trusting to begin with, or nevertheless it's still going to be Code crashing into Konoha and creating chaos, which again, we would have a little bit less of a hard time if we had, I don't know, the 7th Hokage there and Sasuke. Like, Kawaki, you idiot, why did you do all of this, homie? Like, there was other ways, I'm sure. And I'd imagine if they were even to attempt to utilize some sort of partnership with Code, Sasuke wouldn't necessarily just allow it to be very simple, cut and dry. He would probably have very heavy eyes on Code, which again, Code having his claw marks, it's hard to really keep him in captivity. Likewise, the fact that Sasuke has been absolutely debuffed to high hell, it would be very difficult for him to, even if he has eyes on him, keep him in location long enough for Boruto to actually make his move using the claw marks to jump over to the other side. Not to mention the fact that I think even if you have the claw marks, Code still needs to drag you in, if I'm not mistaken. And let's not forget the fact that the Juvie, I'd imagine, has a mind of its own and it's not completely under the control of Code. So yeah, how would that work if the Juvie is ready to attack? Like, is Code having it at its disposal at this point? How much control does Code have over that thing to begin with? So in actuality, despite the fact that they may potentially go down the route of utilizing him for some sort of infiltration into Konoha, ultimately there's not much of a true alliance that can be sustained there. And of course, if Code isn't under the brainwash of Ada, then that's going to be a massive problem for Boruto and Sasuke, and that could be a small arc in and of itself of Boruto and Sasuke clashing with Code, because Code might be looking at Boruto with the same exact disdain and hatred that he had for Kawaki, believing that it is actually Boruto that he has those feelings for, considering the fact that yes, Code was under the spell of Ada when it came to that whole love thing that she had going. So it might be the same case of him actually having that whole mind swap as everybody else that went under the spell of Ada under Kawaki's wish. And on a side note, I guess it also makes you question what Bug's part would be played in all of this situation, considering he's one of the only people that is actually at Code's side. If they were to try and bargain for some sort of, you know, collaboration, so to speak, how would that work? Because I'd imagine Code's big thing would be like, yeah, I'll help you to get into the leaf, but I want my revenge on Kawaki. Likewise, Boruto probably wouldn't like that. And again, Bug's whole position in this whole situation, I'd imagine, would simply just be him quivering and cowering in fear. But extremely curious what you guys think about this whole situation. Do you think there's a possibility that Boruto and Sasuke will actually partner up or team up with Code to invade the Hidden Leaf in order to actually get their hands on Kawaki? Would that even be on the table for them, considering the fact that Boruto still wholeheartedly wouldn't mind snatching Code out of his jacket and, you know, doing him absolutely dirty? Not to mention Momoshiki inside of him wouldn't mind slapping him around as well, like he did the first time. And do you think that it's going to be Code and the Ten Tails that is going to be the inevitable destruction of Konoha? That scene that you see in the first episode, first chapter of Boruto, is that the cause of Code and the Ten Tails, or is it truly that Kawaki has gone absolute mad, and despite the fact that he's Konoha's doll baby, still the one that levels it out and destroys everything because of whatever reasons he's at that point mentally with? And your overall thoughts and expectations for Boruto when it returns with chapter 81 and beyond. So laugh for this one. I'm ForneverWorld, and as always, people, have an awesome day. Subscribe and hit that bell to get more. Yeah.
I have a dream, alone in my room as I sit with the tea. Couldn't possibly think what I often see, and you don't even know how I often blink. Lights be flashing and looking at me, such an odd unique, yet I'm so unique and you're looking at me. If the walls could talk, they would probably read bleak, and I'd probably say, bitch, get the fuck off me.